Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture on Security Token Service. This lecture is going to be available both in the SysOps course as well as the developer course because you are going to need to know this as a SysOps administrator as well as a developer. So let's talk about the STS service. Basically, it grants users limited and temporary access to AWS resources. Users can come from 3 different sources. So Federation, which is typically Active Directory, that uses security assertive markup languages, which is abbreviated to SAML, and it grants temporary access based off the user's Active Directory credentials. It does not need to be a user in Identity Access Management, and it also allows a single sign-on for users to log into the AWS console without assigning IAM credentials. We then also have federation with mobile apps, so users can use their Facebook, Amazon, Google, or other OpenID providers to log in or to basically work with the AWS resources. And then we also, STS is used for cross-account access, so it lets users from one AWS account access resources in another. So let's just break down some of the terms because it can be sound quite complex, and I just want to put it into plain English so you understand the terms when you go in and tackle these exam questions. So federation simply means combining or joining a list of users in one domain, such as Identity Access Management, with a list of users in another domain, such as Active Directory, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, Amazon itself, etc. Okay, so that's what federation is. You're just combining a list of users from one service with a list of users from another service. An identity broker is a service that allows you to take an identity from point A and join it or federate it to point B. Okay, that's what an identity broker is, and most of the time you'll have to develop your own identity brokers because it doesn't come out of the box, and that's a really key thing to look for in the exam. If you see develop your own identity broker and there's 2 questions like that, those are the 2 correct answers, and then you need to whittle it down from there. An identity store, well, that's services like Active Directory, Facebook, Google, etc. And then identities are users of a service like Facebook, so they're end users, users of Active Directory, users of Google, etc. Okay, so I'm going to give you a scenario, and then we're going to go through, this is how you'll sort of see it in the exam, or we'll go through an exam question, but let's talk about the scenario and we'll go through it in depth as to how it actually works. So you're hosting a company website on some EC2 web servers in your VPC, and users of the website must log in to the site, which then authenticates against the company's Active Directory servers, which are based on site at the company's headquarters. Your VPC is connected to your company HQ via a secure IPsec VPN. Once logged in, the user can only have access to their own S3 bucket. How do you go ahead and set this up? Okay, so let's have a look at this diagram. This is exactly how we would go ahead and set it up. So our enterprise reporting application is basically our web application that our employees need to access. They will then need to authenticate against Active Directory and then basically be able to access the Amazon service. So we're going to break each step down. And so I just want you to have a clear understanding. So step number one, the employee enters their username and password. Step number 2, the application calls an identity broker, and the broker captures the username and password. Now, if you remember, an identity broker basically allows us to speak from one identity provider to another. The identity broker in step 3 uses the organization's LDAP directory to validate the employee's identity. So it's taken the username and password, it's checking that it's correct using LDAP, and then we're moving on to step 4. Once it is correct, the identity broker calls the get federation token using the IAM credentials. The call must include an IAM policy and a duration, so between 1 to 36 hours, and this duration is how long the user is going to be able to connect to the AWS resources, along with a policy that specifies the permissions to be granted to the temporary security credentials. Okay, in step 5, the security token service then confirms that the policy of the IAM user making the call to the get federation token and gives the permission to create new tokens, and then returns 4 values to the application: an access key, a secret access key, a token, and a duration, which is basically the token's lifetime, how long that token is valid for. In step 6, the identity broker returns the temporary security credentials to the reporting application. And then in step 7, the data storage application uses the temporary security credentials, including the token, to make request to Amazon S3. Step 8, Amazon S3 uses IAM to verify the credentials and allow the requested operation on the given S3 bucket and key. And then in step 9, IAM provides S3 with the go-ahead to perform the requested operation. So those are the 9 steps, and I know what you're thinking: complete mind overload. How the hell am I going to remember those 9 steps in the exam? Well, the good news is you don't really have to. You just need to have a basic understanding of how it works, and I'm going to distill it down to you. So essentially, the first step you need to do is you need to develop an identity broker to communicate with LDAP and Amazon's STS service. Okay, so you're going to need to develop this in-house. Essentially, your identity broker is going to need to take the username and password from the front end, communicate with Active Directory, and then communicate with Amazon's STS service. The identity broker always authenticates with LDAP first and then with AWS STS. Okay, so you develop an identity broker, and then just remember the order. It's always LDAP first and then Amazon STS. The application then gets temporary access to the AWS resources. If you remember those 3 steps, you'll be able to pass the exam, because that really just distills the process down. You don't have to go in there remembering all 9. In scenario 2, it can be slightly different. So you develop an identity broker to communicate with LDAP and AWS STS. Now, instead of using a user authentication, it could assume a role. So your identity broker could always authenticates with LDAP first, but it could ask your Active Directory server what role is associated with this user. Is this user a power user? Are they administrator? And it could get a predefined role from Active Directory. The application would then authenticate with STS, and it would assume that role. So you're using roles here rather than user credentials, and then the application uses that role to interact with S3. Okay, so I know it can seem quite complicated. If you just remember scenario 1, so in the exam, basically you develop an identity broker. The identity broker speaks to Active Directory first, and then to Amazon STS, simple security token service, and then the application then gets temporary access to the AWS resources. You remember that going into the exam, you're going to fly through any exam question that talks about this in detail. Okay guys, I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.